Hello and welcome to the Metal Pack Pod, the podcast dedicated to the global metal packaging industry. This podcast is brought to you by The Metal Packager, and I am your host, Alex Fordham. For those of you who have not yet subscribed to The Metal Packager, please be sure to visit metalpackager.com/subscribe. Here, subscribers get access to a number of offerings, including email newsletters, text alerts, and full access to premium feature content. Now on to today's show. The aluminium beverage can industry in the US has announced new, ambitious aluminium beverage can recycling rate targets that will deliver significant environmental and economic impacts. These targets are being set through the Can Manufacturers Institute and the Aluminium Association, and today we're lucky to have Scott Breen, Vice President of Sustainability at CMI, and Matt Meenan, Senior Director External Affairs at the Aluminium Association. In the show, we discuss the importance of these new recycling rate targets in the US and the roadmap to its success. I hope you enjoy the show. First off, Scott, I suppose it's probably an ideal opportunity here if you could just provide a brief overview of the synopsis of the presentation that you gave the other day, looking into the recycling rates and how CMI are going to hopefully move some change within the industry.
Totally. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it, especially, I felt bad when we did our initial interview. I couldn't quite talk about it just yet, but now it's all out there. And what we've put out there now is the first time that aluminum beverage can manufacturers and aluminum can sheet suppliers have set collectively new aluminum beverage can recycling rate targets for the United States. And these are CMI members. They've set these targets, and they are trying to move from the current 45% recycling rate in 2020 to a 70% rate by 2030, 80% by 2040, and 90% plus by 2050. They're setting these targets because they know the more aluminum beverage cans we recycle, the healthier the US recycling system is. But also the industry needs this to happen. We need those cans back because we can put them right back into new cans. And that helps our sustainability story and helps our industry grow. So that's why we came together to set these new targets.
And Matt, I'd like to bring you in here. I mean, is it very much a joint effort? I mean, how do things work on the sort of the bureaucracy side of things? And is it very much a case of bureaucracy is probably not the word to speak there, but more and more so, I mean, is this very much a 50% partnership, or are you supporting CMI? I mean, how does it work on the ground?
Yeah, I think we've got a great partnership with CMI. We actually share members. So our sort of main members are sort of the supplier members at CMI. So we represent really the guys who make the can sheet. CMI represents the can makers, but then also our members are sort of, I don't know, you call them associates or supplier members or whatever the term of art is.
Supplier members.
Yeah, so we sort of share membership. So there's a lot of alignment. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on a lot of stuff. And this is definitely one where we very much agree and support, this effort to move recycling rates in the right direction. It's something we've been, obviously been advocating for a long time, finding ways to try and move the rate in the right direction. But I think, having a target and a goal and a really firm commitment, from our industry, and then we're hoping we can sort of bring more partners along over time to sort of support this effort is really critical. If you don't have a goal, it's a little hard to kind of know where you're heading for or where you're going. So we're really excited to sort of have this target in place.
So no, it sounds fantastic. Is this something that's been in the offing for a couple of years, or is this very much because we've seen the targets set from Metal Packaging Europe? Was it very much an offset of that? I mean, what's the thinking behind this?
I mean, I wouldn't call it years. I'd call it months. It certainly took some back and forth, getting the numbers quite right, thinking through the 4 pillars of action. So we didn't just announce these targets and say, we'll tell you later how we're going to do it. In our announcement, we said that there's these 4 pillars, which I can get into, that will allow us to, we think, actually meet these targets. And like Matt mentioned, we have the aluminum can sheet suppliers, we have the aluminum beverage can manufacturers. They're on what we call the CMI Beverage Can Sustainability Committee. It was through this committee that we refined these targets. And I think I've told Matt this before, that I was hearing from some people, maybe it's too much, and hearing from some others, maybe it's not far enough. And that's kind of when I knew, okay, we're in a good spot.
Yeah, Matt, it's something that I'm not sure if you heard my question in the press conference a couple of weeks ago, but my initial take on this was perhaps that the targets weren't ambitious enough, but actually having done a little bit more research seen the feedback that you guys have provided. I've actually probably done a sort of a full 360 on this, and looking at the 45% rates that we're currently at. These do seem very ambitious, and particularly the fact that in 2020 recycling rates actually went down a little bit. So I just wondered on your take on this about how much of a challenge is this going to be, particularly in the era of sustainability and the environment, and we've had COP26, and these things are really seem to be important for consumers at the moment. And the fact that in 2020 recycling rates actually dropped a little bit in the US, does that indicate that this is really going to be a difficult challenge for you guys?
I would refer to it as an ambitious, if not aggressive goal. No question. I think this is probably maybe even a bit of a stretch goal for us, at least up to 2030. But on the other hand, I think there's no question that in the last little while, but particularly the last couple of years, this is really front and center. Sustainability issues in general and recycling is obviously a huge part of that for the aluminum industry. It's really sort of reached a new level of importance, I think, within certainly our companies, but I think, corporate America in general, where this is really now a C-suite issue. So I think we are uniquely positioned at this time to make some real progress, and, we'll see where we are in a few years. But I think with some of the efforts that I'm sure Scott can kind of walk through on the pillars of action, container deposit, new technology at MRFs, this latest investment in U.S. infrastructure. I think all of that is going to sort of move us in the right direction. But no question, I mean, this has been a long-term challenge of ours. We've seen the rate sort of go up and down over the years. There are these macro forces at play that drive that number. But I think the other point I would make is, we've frankly been frustrated over the years. We put this report out every year. We watch it very carefully. We pay close attention to it, and it's frustrating to see us not moving in the right direction. And so I think this hopefully will be a catalyst for action for the industry to kind of turn that ship around a bit.
And Alex, if I may add to that, just in terms of how aggressive it is. I mean, we talk about how the current recycling rate, 45% in 2020. And that means we put out a little over 100 billion aluminum beverage cans. So we're recycling around 45, 46 aluminum billion beverage cans. So to make just a 1% increase, we need to get a little over 1 billion aluminum beverage cans recycled that weren't before. And that's just in 2020 numbers. We're expecting growth in this industry. So we'll have to get even more. So it's going to Matt's point, it's kind of a stretch goal. It's ambitious, maybe aggressive. But we also feel it's important for the reasons outlined earlier. Yeah,
that was my initial question of that, whether the targets weren't ambitious enough. Perhaps that's me looking at it from a more global point of view, when you look at rates in Brazil and Europe, for instance, when actually I think the complexities, and you guys are the experts, but the US, because it's countries within a country almost, so to speak, isn't it? And certainly with things like deposit schemes, it does seem a challenge for you guys to have a unified approach.
Yeah, you have to look at our current recycling rate. You have to look at the system in which we're operating, and you have to look at the volume of containers that are put out in our region. And that's what makes it difficult relative to some others.
In the US, it's not even simply state level programs. It can be hyper local programs. I mean, there's literally thousands of different recycling programs throughout the United States. You obviously have container deposit programs in about 10 states currently. And that's where, again, we get not majority, but probably a plurality of our cans back from. But, even within the states, you have sort of these micro programs. And so you've got to find a way to, navigate that and navigate the fact that there's not going to be a one size fits all approach to recycling as you may get in some of these other countries.
Just before we get onto the 4 pillars of action, just wanted to hear what the feedback has been throughout the industry so far since you had the initial launch. Has it been overly positive, or has there been any feedback or anything that you've reflected on since the discussion?
I mean, we were careful to tell all the partners and stakeholders as soon as we could what was happening. We looked at European Aluminium and Metal Packaging Europe's roadmap for 2030. They're trying to get 100%. So we looked at what they were doing. We asked others what we should include. And of course, to Matt's point, we've been reporting on this and trying to move this needle for a while. So I think with our collective experience, we've got the right things in there. And based on what I said earlier about some people said too much, some people said too little, I think that led to the right target. So people are saying, okay, they're in the right spot.
Okay, and yeah, that leads nicely onto the four pillars of action. If you could just give a brief overview of how you guys plan to put this into place.
Sure. So the first pillar is maybe the most core to the plan, where we want to catalyze new, well-designed deposit systems. And you were asking earlier how CMI and Aluminum Association are working together. And this is probably the one we're maybe working the most closely on, as we've set up a joint task force on deposits. We're trying to advocate at the federal level and at key states that the members of this task force are agreeing, okay, these are states where there's a lot of cans going to landfill, and the politics are such that we could actually get new deposits. So that's number one. Number two is increase and improve household and away from home recycling. I say increase because in some households that have curbside recycling, there are some inconsistent recyclers out there. Sometimes they put the cans in the recycling bin, sometimes they don't. We want to improve that. And then in terms of the actual access, we have data from the recycling partnership that shows if you take a household from simply drop-off recycling to curbside recycling with robust education, you cut the amount of cans going to trash like in more than half, right? So it's a big deal when you can improve access. And then away from home recycling is just a problem across the board. I mean, if you go to the big cities here in the United States, there might be some recycling bins, but you look inside them and there's a lot of contamination. When the recycling bins aren't paired up with the garbage, people just put whatever they want in there. Public parks, beaches, we need to make sure that there's the infrastructure there for people to recycle. And actually, there's some overlap with the deposit system, right? Because if people have an incentive to hold on to their containers while they're out and about, it's more likely they'll recycle it. So, okay, we've got deposit systems, we got increase and improve household and away from home recycling. Number three is proper sortation at material recovery facilities, or MRFs. So MRFs are where we sort single stream recyclables in the United States. There's about 350 of them across the country. And they vary in terms of how modern they are, what technology they have. And it's really important that they have like a baseline of can capture equipment, like an eddy current that can separate out the aluminum. But it's also important, especially for the high volume MRFs, that they have additional can capture equipment so that if cans get missorted before they reach that eddy current, which is pretty darn effective, then it can still be captured. And the can industry realized that this was an issue, and we've actually stepped up with funding from Ardell Metal Packaging and Crown Holdings, where we've got a grant program going with the recycling partnership, where we've given out 4 grants so far for this additional can capture equipment. And with just those 4 grants at 4 MRFs, we're going to capture 67 million aluminum beverage cans per year. And when those cans are recycled, it'll deliver $1 million in revenue and create energy savings to power 26 million US homes for an hour. And that'll be every year when those cans are recycled that otherwise would have been missorted. So that's the third. And then fourth is increased consumer understanding of the importance of aluminum can recycling and the ability to collect and sell used beverage cans for cash. I'm actually really proud of the fact that we've put out some new tools to help others tell our story. We've been telling the story for a while, but we want to enable others. So we've put out an aluminum beverage can sustainability communications toolkit that has stats with citations, downloadable graphics that people can easily put in their newsletters and their social media, whatever they want. They don't need to ask us for permission, just go forth and use it. And the second tool we created is canrecyclingimpact.com. And this website has a tool on it where people can put in the number of aluminum beverage cans and steel food cans that they've recycled and see their impact, their absolute impact in terms of CO2 equivalent emissions avoided and energy saved. But then they can also see it in relatable metrics, like how many loads of laundry can I do, or how many miles can I drive? And that allows people to tell stories. And then thirdly, we put out cansforcash.com. So I mentioned part of this pillar is increasing the awareness that people can collect and sell beverage cans for cash. This is including in non-deposit states. There are thousands of metal scrapyards across the United States. We've created this website so people can easily find it with a tool that our partner iScrap app has created. You put in your zip code, see the metal scrapyards near you, and then you call them up, make sure they take the used beverage cans. And then on the website, we've got tips on how you can do that and how much you can expect to make. So I think between those 4 pillars, deposits, household and away from home recycling, sortation at MRFs, and consumer understanding and the ability to collect cans for cash, we're going to make some serious progress.
You can tell you're a pro because you did that in one take. So I have to say that's very impressive. So kudos to you there. yeah, some interesting information there. I mean, Matt, what would you, out of those four pillars, what for the Aluminium Association, what would you say is the most significant of those?
Yeah, I think as Scott mentioned, I mean, look, we've looked at this over the years and really concluded that the best way, probably most significant way to move recycling rates in the right direction is container deposit program. So I think we're leaning in pretty heavily there. We have a lot of research to back this up, that you look at the recycling rates for aluminum cans in non-deposit states, and you can be in the, maybe 40% range, 30-40% range. When you're in a deposit state, you're often 80% or above. So it really makes a profound difference in terms of how many cans are coming back into the system. So I think that's probably number one. I think number two is we do have a big opportunity in this country right now with this new round of infrastructure investment to really make some changes in terms of the recycling infrastructure in the U.S. And this is not just an aluminum can problem. This is a problem for all the materials. We have an aging system, and I think Scott laid out some of the ways that with a pretty minimal investment, you can end up having a pretty good kind of ROI at some of these municipal recycling facilities to bring back more cans. Good for the environment, good for the economy, all of those things, the things that everybody likes. So, I think deposit and infrastructure are probably my number one and two.
And I suppose from a raw materials standpoint, the issues going on in the industry, such as lack of raw materials and supply chain issues, something such as this at the moment is even more important.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's one of the things we talk about with supply chains a lot is for one thing, the U.S. has really shifted pretty dramatically, as we're much more of an aluminum recycler today than we were 30, 40 years ago. The percentage of our production in the U.S. that's recycled is something like 80% now. It was 20-30% back in the 80s and 90s. So we've really shifted our production footprint, and I think the more of that recycled metal you can get back in the system, it eases up some of these supply challenges that we see.
Yeah, and I will say, just to give you a sense, Matt's talking about the scale of how we're now a big aluminum recycler. One of the stats that always blows my mind is that we updated the number for 2020. Nearly 90,000 aluminum beverage cans per minute are recycled in the United States. And I know Matt's been working hard on this new website, aluminum.org, where it has this cool ticker where it's up to like every second there's like a crazy number of cans that are now recycled. And I think it's pretty cool. So people should check that website out. But that just gives you a sense of the scale.
I've got it pulled up as we speak, and we're at 40,199,527,000, and it goes up and up and up for the year, and and then we'll sort of reset at the beginning of the year.
Certainly doing a fantastic job. And I mean, one of the questions that I did want to ask is, I mean, with these ambitious recycling rates, is the barriers to success. I mean, what do you think are the most significant challenges the industry has to pull this off? Really, is it a case of getting consumers on board, or is it the case of the deposit systems in some states? I mean, what's your take on this?
I mean, I think one of the barriers is certainly getting new deposits in place. I mean, one of the things we've talked about is even if we get a bill passed, right, for a new deposit, there's going to be some lag time between it when it actually comes online. So getting a deposit system well designed and getting that passed quickly is a barrier. And it's tough because we're changing the status quo, right? And I think for some people, it's going to be an educational thing. Or if you haven't lived in a state, some people, you're not aware of it. What is this new refundable fee here? So we need to do a good job of educating what it is and how to do it well. I think the other barriers are what we've talked about. We don't have that additional can capture equipment and MRFs. The public space recycling isn't where it needs to be. Easy household recycling for all Americans, not the case today. And that's going to take significant investment, not just from some of the can industry, but from people upstream of us, downstream of us. It's going to be a collective sort of thing to really get the kind of funding that's needed to improve that sort of infrastructure. And as Matt noted, some of it now is available with what's passed. But also a barrier is the misconceptions about our recycling system. We haven't seen a lot of recycling is broken articles because the prices have increased for so many commodities and things are going quite well, actually. But it's hard to get people to trust that the cans are going to be recycled when they've heard these stories, when they think that it doesn't get recycled, so why bother? But we want them to know that your can, if anything's getting recycled, it's your can, because that's the thing that's valuable. That's the thing that, as the key performance indicator report we just released shows, that 93% of the time those recycled cans get turned into new cans. So recyclers love it and we love it. So people need to know that they can trust that their cans are going to get recycled. And then lastly, I think part of the barrier is that our recycling system today is trying to handle materials that can't pay their own way. And that can drag down the recycling system and make it harder to get the kind of changes we're talking about to get more cans recycled.
You're talking about variable deposit schemes there, as opposed to fixed schemes, because that's been a challenge certainly in Europe and in the UK actually as well, where metal has been almost pigeonholed with other packaging formats, which then almost devalues the work that we've been doing to try and educate consumers that actually aluminium is well worth recycling because of the inherent benefits that it has.
Totally. So variable rate deposits, where people pay a different deposit based on the size of the packaging, is one of our key principles to a well-designed deposit system. And I have to tip my hat to Tom Giddings and Alupro. They made me aware of this, and they put out a nice report with London Economics that really models out the potential impact. I mean, a deposit done wrong can harm the can industry and lead to an inefficient system generally. So that's why we're out there trying to make the case for what is a well-designed deposit system. And it's not just us. I mean, hopefully you saw that in Market Watch, we had a joint op-ed published with the international circular economy nonprofit Reloop and the advocacy organization U.S. Public Interest Research Group, two powerful players within this dialogue around what is a circular economy and how do we recycle right. And they're aligned with us. They signed this joint op-ed with us. And one of those key principles there is that variable rate.
Matt, one question I was going to ask is, would you describe this as a once in a generation opportunity for the industry because of the positivity that we've seen and also the media coverage for the environment, for recycling, for sustainability at the moment, and also because of coming out of the pandemic as well, where metal packaging has obviously seen a boost and the industry is booming as well. So all of these factors, potentially it's a perfect storm. So do you think it's a case of the industry needs to capitalize now, or it's really going to miss out on an opportunity?
I think potentially, yes. I mean, I think, look, all those factors you lay out are very much play. But I think we also have to recognize this is a long-term play here. I mean, this is not something we're going to be able to turn around in a year or two. I think we won't really have a sense of where we are probably till mid-decade, if we're moving things in the right direction. So this is going to be a long-term effort. We did a little bit of modeling as we were coming up with the numbers and looked at, even if you get one or two states, it's a point or two, in the right direction. I think you add on top of that, again, hopefully some of these infrastructure changes, and you could see some real progress, but it's going to take time and it's also going to take commitment. I mean, this can't be a one-off for us. So I think that's really the challenge for us as an industry, is to say, hey, this is something that really matters and is important. And we got to keep pushing forward because we've sort of put our money where our mouth is now in terms of the goals.
And the caveat to that, Scott, I'll bring you in here, is that because the industry is so busy, we're seeing unprecedented demand within the can making industry. We're seeing several new greenfield sites from the likes of Wall Corporation, Crown, etc. Everyone's so busy, and it's really shone a light on the demand and also the fact that the industry perhaps is struggling with the infrastructure in place, hence the need for new can plants, etc. So yeah, to get to my point, does it mean that there's going to be pressure here to deliver this because everyone is focused on other projects? Does it mean that something such as recycling targets, is that going to be the danger? Is it's going to be left in the background a little bit, and then who's going to be driving this?
I mean, I think there's pressure to deliver for several reasons. I mean, one, we just put ourselves out there saying these are our targets and we're going to achieve them, right? So I think for us to have credibility, we need to make progress. I mean, even if we don't reach these stretch goals, we've got to make progress, and we got to report on what we're doing and what we learned and how we intend to build from there, right? But yes, it's also important to achieve because that's what the consumer wants. They want higher recycled content. We already have industry leading recycling rates of recycled content, but this is the way to get it higher. We need more scrap. And this is the best way we know how to do it.
You mentioned interacting with consumers as well. Is there any plans for celebrity endorsements or anything like that? I know Ball Corporation did the famous thing with Jason Momoa from Game of Thrones. Is there any plans for sort of influencers on Instagram and TikTok and things like that? Just curious about if there's anything sort of outside the box, so to speak, for any ideas to really make a difference here.
Yeah, I mean, we are always looking for out of the box ideas. I mean, I will say recently we tried something where it was called the Metal Packaging Challenge, where we did work with an influencer. Her name was @PlantBasedBlonde. I forget her real name, Carolyn, but that's her name on Instagram. And we worked with her to launch this Metal Packaging Challenge, where we challenged her followers to only use no packaging or metal packaging for some period of time. It could have been a day, could have been a week, whatever it was. And then they were asked to post with #MetalCanChallenge, tag some friends, and tell us how many cans they used and recycled during the course of the challenge. Once they entered, they were entered in for a prize, as well as we donated to @PlantBasedBlonde's local food pantry the number of cans that people said they recycled. So this is different. You know, it's kind of playing off how a lot of people say, oh, I tried to avoid plastic, so difficult. We're saying, no, let's be more positive. Try to only use these things, right? Only use these cans that you can just readily put in the recycling bin and feel really good about. And we had people take us up, and we donated a couple hundred cans, and people were generating organic content, right? Where they were saying, I did this challenge. Here's a picture of all the cans I used. And here's some of the stuff I learned from @PlantBasedBlonde's posts. So I'd love to see more of that. I think we've got to figure out ways to get people to generate their own content. I think I mentioned some of the tools that we've put out there to help with that. But the more people see their friends and family talking about cans, the better we're going to be than just boosting our own posts, which has its place too. But that organic content, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. And just to round things off from my perspective, if you guys got anything else to add that you think that we've missed for potentially our listeners to really get a glimpse of how these targets are going to be a success?
Well, I'll just say that we do intend to put out a roadmap next year that will have a fair bit of the details we already said, but flush it out some more. Matt mentioned some modeling we've done. We're going to be very clear in our models about how we could reach these targets with a national deposit system and without, what it will take. But I will say, just to leave this with your listeners, part of the importance of achieving these targets. So let's say in 2020, instead of that industry-leading 45% recycling rate, we had reached the target. We got to 70%. That would mean 25 billion more cans recycled, right, that year if we had reached the target. And if those 25 billion cans had been recycled, we would have generated $400 million in revenue for the U.S. recycling system. And we would have had energy savings that could have powered more than 1 million U.S. homes for an entire year. So whether you're looking at it from an environmental lens or an economic lens, or a can industry lens or a U.S. recycling system general lens, us making progress toward these targets and achieving them is significant.
And Matt, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd kind of add is, you know, it's really sort of a two stories here on the aluminum can. I mean, on the one hand, we're really proud of the fact that I think we're already probably the best option in terms of sustainability for a single-use beverage package. Certainly, highest recycling rates, by far the highest recycled content. Scott talked a little bit about our new closed loop recycling rate that really shows how, can goes back into can and it can happen over and over and over again, which is not the case with some of the competitor packaging types. We add huge value to the recycling system overall. All of those things are true, but it is also true that we are still leaving a tremendous amount of value on the table with the number of cans in the U.S. that end up in landfills each year. You're talking about $800 million worth of aluminum that's just going in the trash year after year, which is just, it doesn't make sense environmentally, it doesn't make sense economically. And so I think we just need to tell that story of, hey, look, we're already doing really well in a lot of ways, but we could be doing so much better. And I think that's what, these recycling goals are going to help sort of get us towards and catalyze.
Thanks very much to Scott and Matt for a very informative conversation on a topic which certainly resonates with consumers globally. At the moment, conditions are prime for the industry to really capitalise on this and really improve its position on beverage can recycling rates. As we discussed on the pod, the complexities of the US political system means that the challenges to implement a universal recycling strategy really is problematic. However, the CMI have put in place a comprehensive strategy to make things work, and with the backing from the industry, it looks like a fair chance of this succeeding. I'd appreciate it if you take the time to review this podcast and help spread the word on our podcast on the Metal Packager, the world's fastest growing resource for the global metal packaging market. We'll be back real soon for our next episode, so you take care now.